The first time my roommate asked me to marry her, she was standing barefoot in our sunlit kitchen, clutching a crumpled letter in one hand and trembling so badly that coffee spilled from the mug in the other. I thought she was joking. I even laughed for half a second until I saw the tears gathering in her eyes. Then she looked directly at me and whispered, "Please, Callum. I need you to pretend to be my fiancé before my family gets here." Before I could understand what she was asking, the doorbell rang. She grabbed my hand, pulled me toward her, and said the words that would change both our lives. "Whatever happens, don't let go of me. Before we continue, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Vibes if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of standing beside someone when they need you most." My name is Callum Hayes, and until that morning, my roommate, Maren Vale, had been the most independent person I had ever met. She never asked for help carrying groceries, even when both arms were full. She repaired broken cabinet hinges herself, watched online tutorials to fix the washing machine, and once walked 3 miles home in the rain rather than call anyone for a ride. She worked as an assistant curator at a small local art museum, while I designed commercial buildings for an architectural firm across town. We had been roommates for nearly 2 years, sharing a modest apartment with pale walls, mismatched furniture, and a wide living room window that filled the entire place with sunlight every morning. We were not best friends, at least not in the way people usually described friendship. We did not tell each other everything. Maren guarded her past like a locked room, and I had learned not to force the door. Still, we had built a quiet life together. She remembered that I hated raisins in breakfast cereal. I knew she drank tea when she was anxious and coffee when she was exhausted. On Sundays, we bought groceries together. On warm afternoons, we sometimes sat on the balcony without speaking, listening to traffic below and pretending that silence was not its own form of intimacy. That morning, however, everything familiar about her had disappeared. She was pale, frightened, and staring at the front door as though someone dangerous stood on the other side. I asked who was there, but she only pressed the crumpled letter against her chest and told me it was her mother, her older brother, and a man named Everett Crow. I had heard Everett's name only once before. Several months earlier, Maren had received a bouquet at the museum and thrown it away before bringing it home. When I asked who had sent it, she said, "Someone who doesn't understand what no means." The doorbell rang again, longer this time. Maren turned to me and said her family believed she had finally agreed to marry Everett. According to the letter in her hand, they were arriving to celebrate the engagement and finalize arrangements for a family-owned property that would transfer to her only if she married before her 30th birthday. Her birthday was 6 weeks away. I stared at her, stunned by the cruelty of the situation. She explained that her late grandmother had left her a small coastal cottage and a collection of paintings, but her father had altered the management agreement before his death, placing temporary control in the hands of Maren's mother and brother. They wanted her to marry Everett because his family had money, influence, and business ties to them. Maren had spent years resisting. She moved away, found work, and built a life that belonged to her. But now Everett had convinced her family that she had secretly accepted his proposal. They were coming to announce it publicly at the museum's fundraising luncheon that afternoon. If Maren denied it without proof of another serious relationship, her mother threatened to declare her emotionally unstable and challenge her ability to manage the inheritance. It sounded absurd, almost theatrical, but fear rarely looks reasonable from the outside. To Maren, it was real. It was her childhood returning in expensive shoes, smiling politely while taking away her choices. I asked why she had chosen me. Her answer was painfully simple. She said I was the only man she trusted. That was how, less than a minute later, I opened the apartment door with Maren's hand wrapped tightly around mine. Her mother, Celestine Vale, stood in the hallway wearing a cream-colored suit and an expression polished into permanent disappointment. Beside her was Maren's brother, Alastair, broad-shouldered and cold-eyed. Everett stood slightly behind them, dressed in a tailored navy jacket, holding a bouquet of white roses as though he had already won. Celestine's gaze dropped to our joined hands. Maren leaned against me and introduced me as her fiancé. the silence that followed felt heavy enough to crack the floor. Everett's smile vanished first. Alastair demanded an explanation. Celestine studied me from head to toe, her eyes lingering on my plain shirt and worn watch, silently calculating my worth. I expected Marin to shrink beneath their scrutiny, but she surprised me. She lifted her chin and said we had kept our engagement private because we wanted something genuine, not a family performance. Her voice remained steady, yet I could feel her fingers trembling between mine. Then Celestine asked to see the ring. Marin froze. That I do not know what instinct took over, but I looked down at her and said we had not bought one yet because I wanted her grandmother's ring restored first. Marin glanced up at me, startled, then quickly nodded. It was a risky guess, but something in the way her eyes softened told me I had accidentally touched the truth. Celestine told us we would all attend the museum luncheon together. She wanted Marin to introduce me publicly, and she warned that if our engagement was fake, the humiliation would be unforgettable. After they left, the apartment fell silent again. Marin released my hand and backed away, apologizing repeatedly. She promised the lie would last only until the inheritance documents were secured. She said I did not have to attend the luncheon. I could still walk away. That I should have walked away. I had a presentation due at work, a supervisor who already questioned my commitment, and a lifelong habit of avoiding other people's family disasters. Years earlier, I had watched my own parents destroy each other through manipulation and resentment. Since then, I had promised myself never to become involved in emotional battles I did not understand, but Marin stood in the middle of our bright kitchen, looking smaller than I had ever seen her, and I realized she had probably faced every battle alone because asking for help had never felt safe. I told her I would go. The museum luncheon began shortly after noon in a glass-roofed courtyard filled with white tablecloths, fresh flowers, and wealthy donors speaking in careful voices. Sunlight poured across the marble floor, making everything appear clean and elegant, even though tension followed us through the room. Marin wore a deep green dress she had borrowed from a colleague. Her hair was pinned loosely behind her head, and though she looked beautiful, I could feel the fear in every breath she took. That we rehearsed the details of our imaginary romance in the car. According to our story, we had fallen in love slowly over shared breakfasts, rainy grocery trips, and quiet evenings on the balcony. The frightening part was that none of those details were invented. Only the word love was supposed to be false. As we entered the courtyard, Marin slipped her arm through mine. Cameras from a local social magazine were already photographing donors. Everett stood near the stage talking to the museum director as if he belonged there. When he saw us, he excused himself and approached with a smile that never reached his eyes. He congratulated me and asked how long Marin and I had been sleeping together. Marin stiffened. I felt anger rise in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. I told him that a man who truly respected a woman would never ask that question. Several nearby guests heard me. Everett's face tightened, and for the first time, I understood why Marin feared him. He did not shout or lose control. He simply stepped closer and quietly told her that pretending to love someone else would not save her. I moved between them. Everett looked at me and said I had no idea what kind of woman Marin really was. He claimed she used people, ran away from responsibility, and destroyed every relationship she touched. His words were chosen carefully, designed to sound like concern. But when I looked at Marin, I saw not guilt but an old wound reopening. I told him I knew exactly who she was. She was the woman who left medicine outside our elderly neighbor's door during winter. She stayed late at the museum to help unpaid interns finish exhibits. She once spent an entire Saturday searching for a child's lost stuffed rabbit because she had seen him crying near the park. She noticed when people needed kindness, even when no one noticed her. I said anyone who described that woman as heartless had probably never deserved her heart. Marin stared at me as though I had revealed something she did not know about herself. Everett walked away, but the confrontation was not over. Halfway through lunch, Celestine approached our table and asked us to join her in a private gallery. Inside, Alastair placed a document on a display bench. It was a statement from a private investigator claiming that Marin and I had separate bedrooms, separate bank accounts, and no evidence of a romantic relationship before that morning. Celestine demanded the truth. Marin's face drained of color. I felt her hand slip from mine. For one terrible moment, she seemed ready to surrender. She began saying that she was sorry, that she had never wanted any of this, and that she only wanted the cottage because it was the last place where she remembered feeling safe with her grandmother. Alastair laughed and called her pathetic. That single word changed something in me. I stepped forward and admitted that we had not been engaged before that morning. Celestine smiled in triumph, but I continued. I said the engagement had begun as a lie because Marin believed lying was the only way her family would listen. Then I told them the part one had not understood until that very moment. The relationship was not fake. The title was fake. The ring was missing. The timing was desperate. But every reason I had agreed to stand beside her was real. Marin looked at me, her eyes shining with confusion and hope. I told her family that love was not ownership, pressure, contracts, or public appearances. Love was knowing someone's favorite tea. It was sitting beside them when they could not speak. It was learning the sound of their footsteps in the hallway and feeling relieved that they had come home. It was wanting them to be free, even if their freedom meant they might never choose you. The gallery became completely silent. Then Everett entered through the open doorway and accused Marin of manipulating me. He said she would abandon me as soon as she received the cottage. He demanded that she prove our relationship was real. Marin turned toward me. Her cheeks were wet now, but there was a new strength in her expression. She placed both hands against my chest and whispered, "Kiss me like you mean it." The word struck me harder than any demand could have. I searched her eyes, needing to know whether this was still part of the performance. She gave the smallest nod, not toward her family, but toward me. So I kissed her. It was not dramatic because people were watching. It was dramatic because the moment everything false disappeared. The noise of the luncheon faded behind us. Her hands trembled against my shirt, and mine rested carefully at her waist. I had spent 2 years keeping an invisible distance between us, afraid that wanting more would destroy what we already had. In that kiss, I understood that Marin had been keeping the same distance for the same reason. When we pulled apart, she pressed her forehead against mine. She whispered that she was tired of being afraid. The proof that saved her did not come from our kiss. It came from someone Celestine had underestimated. The museum's elderly director, Helena Stroud, had followed Everett into the gallery after hearing the confrontation. Helena had known Marin's grandmother personally and had kept copies of the original inheritance instructions. Those instructions contained no marriage requirement. The condition had been added later through a management document signed under questionable circumstances by Marin's father while he was seriously ill. Helena had spent months investigating because Marin's grandmother had once asked her to protect the paintings if the family tried to sell them. She presented emails showing that Everett, Celestine, and Alastair planned to sell the collection and develop the coastal land after the marriage transferred control into a shared family trust. The truth did not create a loud explosion. It created something more devastating: quiet exposure. Donors began leaving the gallery. The museum's legal advisor took possession of the documents. Everett stopped smiling. Alastair blamed his mother, and Celestine blamed everyone except herself. Marin stood beside me, shaking but upright. In the weeks that followed, the marriage condition was formally challenged and suspended. Celestine and Alastair lost control of the estate. Everett disappeared from Marin's life after the museum issued a trespass order against him. The process was not painless. There were legal meetings, difficult phone calls, and mornings when Marin sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing, grieving the family she had always wished she had. I remained beside her, but I did not pressure her to define what had happened between us. The kiss had been real, but real feeling still needed room to breathe. I returned to work, finished my presentation, and tried to act as though my heart did not race every time Marin entered the room. One bright Saturday morning, nearly 2 months later, she asked me to drive with her to the coastal cottage. The house stood above a quiet stretch of beach, weathered by wind and salt. Its white paint was peeling, and tall grass covered the path, but when Marin stepped out of the car, her entire face changed. She looked younger, almost like the child who had once felt safe there. Inside, dust floated through shafts of sunlight. Paintings leaned against the walls beneath protective sheets. In the upstairs bedroom, Maren opened a wooden box and removed her grandmother's ring. She held it toward me and said my guess that morning had been strangely accurate. Her grandmother had always told her that the ring should go to someone who made her feel brave enough to be herself. That I thought she was asking me to complete our fake engagement. Instead, she placed the ring in my hand and told me not to give it back until I was certain. For the next year, we rebuilt the cottage together. We repaired windows, painted walls, and transformed one room into a small community art studio. Maren invited children from nearby schools to attend free weekend classes. I designed accessible spaces and outdoor ramps. The cottage became more than an inheritance. It became proof that something once used to control her could be transformed into a place of freedom. Our relationship changed slowly, honestly, and without performance. We argued about paint colors. We learned each other's fears. She admitted that she sometimes expected people to leave as soon as she needed them. I admitted that I sometimes withdrew before anyone could disappoint me. Loving each other did not erase those wounds, but it gave us a reason to stop hiding them. A year after the museum luncheon, on a clear afternoon filled with sea breeze and warm sunlight, I took Maren to the cliff behind the cottage. Children's paintings were drying on lines below us, and laughter drifted from the studio. I carried her grandmother's ring in my pocket. This time, there was no audience to convince, no inheritance to save, and no lie to maintain that I asked her to marry me because I meant it. Maren cried before I finished speaking. Then she laughed, pulled me to my feet, and said yes. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Lifeline Vibes. Your support helps more stories of healing, kindness, courage, and second chances reach people who may need them. Before the story ends, comment real love sets you free. If you believe the right person will never force you to become someone else just to earn their love. Maren once begged me to become her fake fiancé because she believed she had no other way to protect herself. But the greatest thing I ever gave her was not a convincing lie, a public kiss, or even a ring. It was the simple promise that she would never have to face her fear alone again. And the greatest thing she gave me was the courage to stop standing at a safe distance from life. Sometimes love begins with perfect timing. Sometimes it arrives with flowers, music, and certainty. But sometimes it begins in a sunlit kitchen, with spilled coffee, trembling hands, and one frightened person asking another not to let go. And sometimes, when they finally whisper, "Kiss me like you mean it," the most honest answer is to spend the rest of your life proving that you did.